So today I'm here with Banba, my veiled chameleon, and he is definitely shedding right now, so he is not in the best mood today, but he's doing pretty good. So today I wanted to go over veiled chameleon diet because I get a lot of questions all the time regarding it, and a lot of people are really confused because I feed Banba a lot of vegetables and salads and stuff, and they're like, why are you doing that? He's an insectivore. So I'm going to cover all of that today. So chameleons are insectivores, meaning that they live on insects. However, a lot of chameleons in the wild are known to eat a lot of vegetation, especially veiled chameleons. They in particular are known to eat vegetation in the wild, and it could be just because it helps and aids in digestion. It basically is a lot of fiber to push everything through, and it's just good for them. It's very similar to why people should eat salads and fiber too. In captivity, it's also great to give them vegetables and vegetation also because it also gives them extra hydration, vitamins, and nutrients in their diet. So you can't go wrong with that. So I'm going to go really into depth and talk about their diet. I'm going to go over the insects they can eat, the vegetables they can eat, the fruits they can eat, the salads they can eat, and things that they should not eat. And I'm also going to be covering how often you should be feeding your chameleon as well. And I'll also be covering supplementation as well, so we have a lot to go over in today's video. So I'm going to start off with the insects that these guys eat because they are insectivores, and that is the main part of their diet, and it's very important for them to get all of those healthy insects. Like any diet, variety is key, so as many different things as you can offer them, the better, because then they're getting way more vitamins and nutrients. You don't want to just be giving them one specific type of insect always, because then they're going to be lacking in other areas, and it's best to just mix it up as best as you can. So some of the insects that you can feed them, dubias are great feeders. They're very nutritious and healthy for veiled chameleons. I highly recommend them. Also, if you want to save some money and just have your own breeding colony, they are extremely easy. They reproduce, they don't just die off, and they don't smell. So a lot of people think dubia roaches are disgusting because they're roaches, but I actually find that they're one of my favorite feeders. Another great feeder option are superworms. And superworms are very, very similar to mealworms. However, I would not recommend mealworms because they have very tough exoskeletons, which can be hard to digest. So I find that superworms are just way healthier and easier for your animal to digest. So they're just a better option. Silkworms and hornworms are great feeders as well. Hornworms are probably the best thing that you could feed your veiled chameleon. Not only do they absolutely love them, but they're really, really great for hydration, and they're very nutritious for them. So I know they're kind of hard to come by, but as often as you can find them, you should definitely get hornworms because they are just amazing for veiled chameleons. Another feeder that's very common that you guys probably see at pet stores all the time are waxworms. And Banba in particular loves his waxworms, and he's very picky about his foods, and sometimes I literally have to just give him waxworms all the time just to entice him to eat the other foods around the waxworms. But waxworms are actually very fatty, so you don't want to be feeding that on a daily basis for chameleons or any other reptiles just because they are very fatty. Of course, Banba loves his waxworms though, so I do feed them to him quite frequently, basically because he's picky and he doesn't want to eat his other insects unless he sees waxworms as well. So I kind of have to trick him into eating his other foods by putting waxworms in there as well because this guy is a little fatty. I try to avoid it as much as I can though because they are very fattening. And the last feeder, which is probably the most basic one that you will hear, are crickets. So crickets are very readily sold at Petco and PetSmart or reptile shows. However, they lack a lot of nutrients. So if you are going to be feeding crickets, I highly recommend that you gut load them. You should gut load your other feeders as well, but you really want to make sure you're gut loading the crickets because they just don't have as much nutrients to offer for your veiled chameleon. If you're unfamiliar with what gut loading is basically feeding your crickets healthy vegetables and greens and things. That way they have that in their bellies before you feed it to your veiled chameleon. That way when they eat the cricket, they're getting that other nutrients as well. And if you're unfamiliar with what types of things to feed your cricket, I will cover all of that next because we are going to be talking about the greens that these guys can have in their diet. So the greens that veiled chameleons can eat are hibiscus, ficus, and pothos. Those are actually plants and flowers. So if you are going to be feeding these options, it's very important to make sure that they do not have pesticides on them. So if you want to put that within your chameleon's enclosure, just want to make sure that you're getting it from a healthy place that doesn't use pesticides, and make sure that you wash your plants very, very well before putting it in their enclosure. Some of the other greens, such as like salads and things that these guys can have, are mustard greens, dandelion greens, collard greens, turnip greens. Basically all of the dark leafy greens. It's very similar to what I feed my bearded dragon. So basically whatever I'm feeding my bearded dragon, I'm giving smaller portions of that to my veiled chameleon, along with a lot of insects on top. Some of the fruits that veiled chameleons can have are apples, mangoes, and strawberries. Basically just want to avoid anything very citrusy, so you shouldn't really be giving them oranges or anything like pineapple or lemon. It's just way too citrusy. It's the same rules that I go by with my bearded dragon. So some of the vegetables that veiled chameleons can have are zucchini, carrot slices, squash, and cucumber. There are so many other types of vegetables that they can have. You just want to make sure for a veiled chameleon that you're going to be slicing them up into very small pieces and make sure that it's easy for them to chew and be able to swallow. If you have something like a carrot, you shouldn't be feeding that in chunks because it's very hard for them. What I actually do is I just like slice off little tiny slices of carrot, and then they're basically shredded carrots, and then I rip that off into little pieces and put that on top of his salad. So I'm going to cover the toxic things for veiled chameleons that they shouldn't have, as well as other options of things that just aren't very highly nutritious and I wouldn't recommend trying to feed them. So some of the things are cabbage, figs, apricots, iceberg lettuce, spinach, and avocado. And I also wouldn't recommend kale, broccoli, banana, or citrusy fruits. So basically, again, if you're familiar with bearded dragons or you watched my bearded dragon diet video, you want to avoid all of the same exact things that you would avoid feeding a bearded dragon for a veiled chameleon. So next I'm going to be covering supplementation. So when it comes to supplementation, it can get very confusing. When you have a veiled chameleon, you should already have a UVB bulb for them because they need that UVB desperately. So because you have that UVB, what you're mainly going to be giving them is calcium without D3, because you don't want to overdo it and give them too much D3 because it can actually calcify their organs and you don't want that to happen. So as long as you have that UVB, you should just be feeding daily calcium without D3. And then you also want to be giving them a multivitamin at least once a month. And then you can use calcium with D3 once or twice a month. You just don't want to be overdoing it, and make sure that most of the feedings are without calcium D3. If this is very confusing for you, I actually made a whole video on supplementation. I will put the link in my description for you guys to check it out because I know it can get confusing and I go way more into depth in that video. So when it comes to the feeding schedule for a veiled chameleon and knowing how often to feed them, so if you have a baby chameleon, you should be feeding them every single day, and it's very important for them to be getting those insects and protein when they're babies because they need that to grow. So you shouldn't really be putting that many salads with them or vegetables. Just mainly focus on feeding them all of those insects during that time because they desperately need it. And make sure that you're going to be gut loading those insects so that way they are going to still be getting the nutrition from the salads and such. I would recommend feeding them more of the salads and vegetables more frequently once they start to get bigger. So again, if you have a baby chameleon, you should be feeding them every single day. A lot of people ask me, how much should I be feeding my chameleon? There is no exact number, so it's not like feed him 6 superworms this day and feed him 10 crickets that day. What you want to do is basically just go by your chameleon and see how hungry they are. So the best way to get familiar with your chameleon and bond with him and get him comfortable with you anyway would be to hand feed. So the best thing to do would just to hand feed him some crickets or whatever every single day. And then you can do the 15-minute rule. So basically as much as they'll want to eat within 15 minutes and then stop after that. And then that should be good for the day. So as they get older, they actually get big very, very fast. Banbo was pretty much full grown after 4 months. So he just grew so fast. And so it's just something to keep in mind. So when they are larger, like maybe after the first year or so, they'll definitely be full grown by then, hopefully, if you're taking care of your chameleon correctly. But so they should be full grown at that time. And what I do is I feed Banba usually every other day or every couple days. He is chubby and he loves his food, so he would eat every single day if he could. But some days he's not that interested in food, which I actually tried to feed him today, and I'm gonna put that clip at the end and show you guys what I fed him. But he actually didn't want to eat today. He actually just wanted to come out, so we did that instead. But yeah, so I basically feed him just every other day or every 2 days, and then that's totally fine for them. So again, it's just very important to keep in mind that variety is the most important thing when it comes to keeping a veiled chameleon in their diet. And you want to make sure that you're going to be giving them a lot of different vegetables and different dark leafy greens, because it will give them extra hydration, nutrients, and vitamins, and it's just so good for them. So it's something to keep in mind. And if you ever want to feed your chameleon something that you aren't totally sure of if it's okay for them, absolutely Google it and make sure that it's safe first, because you don't want to end up giving them something that is bad for them and them getting sick or potentially dying. So just always make sure that you're checking to make sure whatever you're going to feed them is safe for them. Because I definitely didn't go over every single thing in this video that they can or can't eat, because I'll be here all day. Like, they can have so many different things. But I listed the most common things that I usually feed my chameleon, because I know you guys are very interested in what it is that I feed him exactly. So I am going to go ahead and show you what I fed him today, and I'm going to throw in some old clips of him eating, because he did not want to eat today, and that's not very exciting. So I actually have some clips of him as a baby when he had like his first cricket from my hand, and it's super adorable, so I'm going to add that at the end. I hope that you guys enjoyed the video. I hope that this was helpful. Please leave a comment if you have any questions. I'm more than happy to help you guys out, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. So I'm about to feed Banba for today, and as you can see, he is shedding, so he's having a great time. But I actually just fed Dude. He's eating over here and making a huge mess. Basically, this is the leftovers that I fed Dude. So what I usually do is I just take little bits of this and use it for Banba. So we have mustard greens, and I believe collard greens are in here. So I like to rip them up into tiny little pieces and then put them over here, because all of this is going to be for Banba. So I just rip them up into little pieces. This is going to be for Banba. He has a little bit of collard greens and mustard greens. I also have little pieces of zucchini that I cut up, so I'm going to give him a couple of these. And I also have a little bit of cantaloupe, so he's also going to get a little bit of cantaloupe today. He hasn't had fruit in a really long time, so he's getting something new today. So I put that on the bottom, and then I'm going to go ahead and get the insects that I'm going to be feeding him, and I put them on top. And then I just put them over into his little cup over here, and then he eats on his own whenever he feels like it. So I just gathered his insects for today. He's going to have some waxworms, 2 superworms, and a little dubia. And I'm going to be using calcium without D3 for him. So I'm just going to dust that on top. And then all of this will just get mixed up, and I will put it into his little bowl, and then he can eat whatever he wants to.